Welcome to episode 104 of the Keri Report. I have a quick, well, maybe not so quick, story to share. A couple of weeks ago, a guest speaker in my community promoted his personal training business and nutrition services. I thought, okay, so he's not a registered dietitian, I'll calm down, but maybe he'll just simply talk about general nutrition, and I viewed it as an opportunity to network with him. And then his talk began. As he told everyone not to eat any grains because of their processing, and our bodies weren't meant to digest them, I realized I was in for a doozy of a discussion. Obviously, it was hard for me to sit quietly, especially those who know me, yet I also didn't want to talk over his talk with my science-based counterpoints. As my pressure was rising, I then asked him about the intake of vegetables. I mean, who could debate the health benefits of them? I thought we'd be totally on the same page. Well, he started pointing out the dangers of oxalates in spinach, and I realized I wasn't going to get anywhere with him and could no longer sit quietly. So I left. I just couldn't sit there. I got up and I left. Stay tuned to find out what happened next. So here I am back in my apartment, steam coming out of my ears, explaining to my husband, and of course Cooper, what happened, and I realized I would turn this into an opportunity. I was going to make lemonade out of lemons. It was an opportunity to educate the consumer through my podcast and social media channels on the paleo diet, because that was what the speaker was basically describing as healthy eating, even though when I started asking him, was he about paleo, he said he wasn't. The funny thing is that I've spoken about the paleo diet over the years, debunking it, etc., but it just doesn't seem to go away. So for today's episode, I thought my guest should be someone who has been out there for years fighting the good fight, sharing science-based information, clearing up consumer confusion, and like myself, loves a good martini. My guest, Rosanne Rust, is a registered dietitian and nutritionist, owner of Rust Nutrition Services and the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics 2024 Media Excellence Award recipient. She provides a variety of nutrition communication services to the food industry and science-based organizations, as well as freelance communications and media work through her Chew the Facts brand. Throughout her 35-plus years in the business, Rosanne has consistently promoted a fad-free, practical approach to healthy eating and is especially interested in agriculture, heart health, reducing food waste, and encouraging healthy eating behaviors. She has authored several consumer books, including Zero Waste Cooking for Dummies and the second edition of D.A.S.H Diet for Dummies. Welcome, Rosanne.
Hello, nice to see you. I'm excited to chat about this topic.
I knew you would love it because I know we get infuriated a lot at the same things. And so I thought this would be a fun discussion. But yeah, I kind of wish there was another registered dietitian in the room with me when he was going off. But then again, I don't know. It was
so you
just
could roll eyes together.
Yes.
I don't. How did we get here where spinach is demonized? I don't know.
I know. I mean, that was like, it was just too much for me to bear. I couldn't deal with it. All right. So let's dive into it. I have so many questions. The first one, could you give a brief overview of the paleo diet and its main principles? I know it excludes certain food groups, and we'll certainly explore that further in the upcoming questions. So kind of like the cliff notes of the paleo.
Sure. So, I think initially, it was formulated by essentially exercise physiologists. Lauren Cordain was sort of the godfather of this dietary plan. He's an exercise physiologist. These guys are PhDs. They're not, nowhere. They don't know. It's not like they don't know anything. They know things.
It's not like they're just it's not like they're just an influencer with a zillion followers.
Right. And he wrote a book, The Paleo Diet, in 2010. Back when we were influencers, not these
Oh,
random
right. Oh,
people.
oh, those were the days. Those were the days. Okay.
Right. So, I mean, to give them credit, they were probably coming from a good space. They're athletes. They wanted a diet that would help performance. And essentially, they did some research, came up with this dietary plan that removes grains, removes dairy. Certain vegetables aren't permitted, legumes, which include peanuts, the starchier vegetables like corn and beans, white potatoes, and pretty much focuses on vegetables, proteins, meat, eggs, and so forth, and fruits and vegetables. So that sounds okay.
Right.
Okay, you're getting rid of sugar because there's no sugar. You're
Right.
also getting rid of any added salt, no added salt.
Okay.
And then you're kind of also pushing dairy aside, grains aside, all grains, and
Right.
some of these nutritious foods like beans and
So
legumes.
let me ask you this,
Um,
but let me ask
yeah,
you, wasn't it, see, maybe then this is just how it got thought of, but I thought one of the main premises that they went on is that we should be eating like our ancestors ate. I,
2.5 million years ago. Right,
right. Okay. So that's what I always thought when people were talking about the paleo is we should be eating like the cavemen, basically, who
right.
didn't live that long for various reasons. I mean,
Ate very different things.
ate very differently. And but
Yeah,
that's what they were kind of promoting for in today's world, or at least when that came out starting in 2010, that's we should be eating more like them.
right. Sort of like our ancestors did. And the interesting thing about that, because I do have some experience on the ag side, the agriculture side, the vegetables of 10,000 or 2 million years ago are not what we're eating now. A mustard plant, there was no broccoli like we see it in the grocery store. So even that part of the philosophy, if you will, of the diet plan fails
Right.
because
Right. Well, you know what?
those foods
Don't didn't
are
exist.
totally different now.
They didn't
All of
exist, and
the meat we eat is completely different. It's all
it's
different.
all different. And you know what
Hmm.
I always say, and I don't know why I still say, and I guess I'm trying to be funny, and maybe it's not funny. I'm like, when they promote the paleo, I wonder if they're also not going into a Starbucks. It's like, okay, but your coffee you're going to get from a Starbucks, but our ancestors certainly didn't have it. So there's like a disconnect there. And maybe I'm also just
Yes.
being too particular about it. But do you know why then they decided to get rid of grains? I mean, especially, which I don't understand. I mean, I know what I've been told why they have, but if this was originally an exercise performance diet plan, I really don't understand why they would have been removing grains.
Right. Because carbohydrates are important energy sources.
Exactly. But do you know
I
why
think,
they eliminated? It had something to do with the grains are not the same.
and it's the potential inflammatory properties of grains. There is definitely a lot of, and I think this is the issue is when this diet and book was published. I don't know if so many myths have come from this diet plan. Other people that are just coming up with um, statements like about inflammatory foods, about wheat today isn't the same as it was, or the wheat in Europe is doesn't make me feel bad, but it
Oh,
does in the U.S. And
that's
all of these
that's a
myths.
whole nother conversation. How
That's a
people
whole
think,
other.
right?
But this diet, the paleo diet, has spurred on all of these myths that we just hear over and over and over today, including that grains are inflammatory,
Right.
that
And
we don't digest
supposedly,
them
right.
well.
And that's, I mean, there's no science. Is there any
There's no
science to that?
science. There isn't. There isn't.
So you
Certainly,
wonder how it
some people don't
started.
tolerate. Yeah, some people don't tolerate some certain foods, but most people have no problem digesting modern grains, if you will.
Right.
Um,
And that's the whole thing,
yeah,
right? They said like they used to tolerate them, our ancestors, but because of the processing, which I've done episodes on that. Almost everything that we eat is processed to some extent,
right.
but supposedly that it's changed the grain, And that's the new grain is the one that is inflammatory. It's causing inflammation in the body.
Right. And part of the misinformation in that myth often leads down the road of glyphosate, that these plants are sprayed with pesticides. Lots of misinformation there too. They are the ground is sprayed before they're planted. They are not sprayed before they're harvested. So lots of misinformation there. And then that brings us also to seed oils being inflammatory and pairing grains, more processed grains like a wheat cracker. Well, it has seed oils in it. We also have to eliminate all of those.
Rosanne, I did. It's funny. I recently did an episode on seed oils, that we should not be afraid of them. And, maybe in this fitness trainer's his talk, maybe he did discuss seed oils, but luckily I wasn't sitting there anymore.
You left by then. I'm sure he did. I'm sure he did. And again, now the original, when the Paleo Diet book, the founders of Paleo Diet, they were okay with seed oils in 2010, but they've changed their mind. So now they're part of the don't eat seed oils misinformation tribe.
But they were originally the no grain people. That was part from the beginning of the diet. So missing all the health benefits that whole grains provide us, as in decreased heart disease, help lowering cholesterol levels, on and on, stabilizing. I mean, so many health benefits.
And grains are fortified with B vitamins, which many people aren't going to be getting if they don't include some fortified grains.
Yeah. No, it's very sad. It's sad. All right. So eliminating grains, I mean, that's where he started his talk, and I got very upset. So then when he all right, I mean, I don't think he listens to my podcast. But anyway, what he then said next, luckily he was encouraging fruit. So I was very excited. I was like, oh my God, somebody's encouraging fruit. I love that. Naturally occurring sugars, nothing added. I was all on board. But then I did raise my hand and I was like, well, what are your views? Because he was drawing a diagram and he didn't have the vegetables in the diagram. And I was like, well, where do the vegetables fit? They were a little off to the side. He was a fan, but only of some. And that's where this whole oxalate discussion began. Can you explain, like, to my listener what oxalates? It's a compound. I mean, exactly what's the deal with them?
It's a naturally occurring molecule. It's in plants. It's in humans. It is present in all fruits and vegetables. Some have higher oxalate contents than others. And, it passes through our digestive tract, into our stool, which is poop for anyone who doesn't know that word, and urine. And, with all of this, it's all about balance. Of course, vegetables are loaded with antioxidants. They provide some fiber to the diet.
Yes.
And oxalates work in conjunction with calcium as well. So in terms of the paleo diet, you're eliminating one of the best sources of calcium, dairy.
Right.
Dairy's gone. So some beginner paleo diet followers may be low, their diets may be low in calcium, and oxalate binds with calcium for excretion.
Yeah.
So is that why a problem if you have a balanced plate?
Right. So is that why some people are like, oh, if you eat foods high in oxalates, you're going to have bone, it's going to be a problem because calcium is going to be taken out of your body along with the oxalates. But how much are we really talking?
Yeah, it doesn't hold up. Right. Yeah, and the other concern for some people are kidney stones. Some kidney stones are oxalate stones, but kidney stones, not everyone's at risk for kidney stones.
Right.
And there are other factors there too. Taking antibiotics can increase oxalate levels. So, it's eliminating vegetables from your diet in fear of oxalates. It's just, how many vegetables are you eating?
Well, that's right. I mean, how many people are eating too much? I mean, his big thing was spinach, and then probably some other vegetable, but I tuned him out by then. And yeah. So oxalates naturally, they're naturally occurring. It's nothing that's added. And
Hmm.
we shouldn't be afraid of them. There's nothing to fear in an oxalate. And yes, there might be some people who are sensitive to getting like a kidney stone, which is from the oxalate.
Well, there's a couple different kinds of
Okay.
stones, but you can have an oxalate stone.
Okay, but
But,
anything,
you
I
know,
mean, we're all
hydration is
right.
important. If your protein intake is too high and imbalanced, then that can also lead to oxalate stones.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anybody who tells you to avoid a vegetable because it's high in oxalates, you might want to rethink talking to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Okay.
I think, Keri, I think we've really lost touch with what a portion is.
Oh,
People often think, right now protein is the superstar nutrient, and the mindset of many people is more is better. If
I
this
know.
is good, I
Yes,
want more.
yes, yes.
And as we always repeat, I think both of us will often say the dose makes the poison.
One of my
It's
favorite
it's balance
phrases.
in
Yes.
everything. Balanced vegetables, balanced protein sources. We have to have some balance. So, spinach is a good source of iron and folate, but you don't want to eat the whole bag
No.
yourself,
No.
every day in one sitting. A half a cup is a portion, and we want you to get about 4 or 5 half cups a day over the day,
Right.
variety and so
Variety.
forth, not all spinach, not the entire bag. So, the dose
Yeah.
makes the
I
poison.
I
Even
always
something good
right.
can turn into something
One
bad if
one
you
hundred
overdo it.
percent. 100%. And that is really one of my favorite phrases.
Me too.
Paleo advocates are also, and you mentioned this, right off the top when we were talking about food groups that are avoided and certain foods that they avoid legumes. Now, legumes consists of, because that's one of those words that not everybody understands. So, legumes are not just beans like black beans, white beans, chickpeas, but they also include peanuts
Peanuts.
and soybeans are legumes. I always get
Hmm.
okay. So, but so basically, they're saying also advocates of paleo to eliminate all of those foods, and and do we know why?
Lectins.
Those
Another
lectins.
another molecule, lectins. They push this philosophy that legumes um, contain what is termed an anti-nutrient.
Aha.
So, of course, nutrients are the substances that nourish humans, plants, animals, so we can grow and live and thrive. Anti-nutrients are termed that because they block the absorption of nutrients. So, lectins are considered an anti-nutrient. However,
I know. Sometimes
lectins are
I just
water
think we can't.
soluble.
Sometimes, Roseanne, I think we can't make this up. Okay, continue.
Yeah, lectins are water soluble, and legumes and whole grains. So this may be part of the no grains philosophy, was to get rid of the lectins as well.
Okay.
Um, Lectins can interfere with the absorption of calcium, iron, phosphorus, but they're water soluble, and their lectins are high in those legumes when they're raw.
Okay. And
Who's eating
nobody.
raw,
No one.
off the tree legumes? No
No.
one.
No.
Their peanuts are boiled.
I
Beans are
wonder if,
soaked and
but I
boiled.
wonder, Roseanne, did our ancestors eat them
Maybe
raw?
they did eat, certainly they ate them raw until they discovered
Yeah,
fire. It
they
was
there was
fire
no
Paleolithic.
right. There was no canning back there, so that's definitely how I eat all of my beans from a can. There was definitely
Right.
not happening. All right, so it's
Yeah.
these.
I mean, here's a fun side note. I have a acacia tree in my backyard here in
Wait,
Florida.
back up. What kind of tree?
Acacia.
What? Okay, I'm a
It's
city
a
girl
it's
at
a pretty
heart.
it's got spikes. It's a tropical tree, and it's got yellow flowers, and I that's why I put it there, because of the yellow flowers. But I found out it's a legume, and it has
Ah,
these green pods that hang down. So neighbors were walking by it last week or the week before, and they said, what? And that's when I researched the tree. Or can you eat these? So I'm like, huh, because we just put it in
Right.
this past year, and I researched the tree. It turns out it's a legume,
Huh.
and you could eat them in what was the, what was the terminology? Like the terminology that I read was something like you could eat them in like survival conditions. Like if
Wait,
you
so
really
you mean if
needed,
we have the apocalypse,
yeah,
then you
then
can
I could
eat
eat
them?
those, and they would be full of lectins
Oh,
because
and I
unless
wonder
I
if,
boiled them
right,
and cooked them.
you wouldn't have
So,
time.
cooked beans that we consume, when we buy canned beans, they're all cooked.
Right,
The lectins have been pretty much destroyed. So that just falls flat, the
right.
whole
And
lectins, worrying about lectins.
you
We're
and
not eating raw
right, not eating raw beans. And to your
legumes.
point, I
We're
mean,
not chewing on raw wheat.
and how much, right? But and if we were, how much are we eating of these beans? All right, so I just find it also
Yeah.
interesting the concern. One, people are being totally misinformed because the bean has to be cooked, and to eat it, we eat cooked beans, so the lectins have been
Mhm.
extremely decreased. And let's
Yeah. Or
suppose that,
destroyed completely.
or destroyed completely. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
all
And the
right,
same with, other grains, rice, pasta. I mean, we're boiling it. By the time we're eating it,
we're not
those
right. We're not
lectins are
eating these
inactive.
foods
Yeah.
raw.
They
All
are
right.
inactive.
So, all right. Well, the next one that they also claim that we shouldn't be eating, another biggie, is dairy. And and their reason for that, do we know?
I don't know other than, I mean, I don't know. I don't know why they chose dairy. If it was the lactose and they thought that,
I,
people have
I wonder,
issues with
right.
lactose
I
intolerance
I wonder if it
and
was the lactose, which then bothers me because not everybody reacts to lactose.
right,
And just so
right.
everyone knows, lactose is naturally occurring sugar that is found in dairy products, including milk and cheese. I mean,
Yep.
any
Yogurt,
yogurt, but
it's
to
lower, but
but to
yeah,
make a statement like that, see, this is to come out and say this is what everyone should do. Really, just it pisses me off because
that
nobody should be everybody's different, and there are foods that either you like, you don't like, foods that agree with you, don't agree with you. Back to my favorite, personal fitness trainer, whatever we want to call him, who was doing his lecture. He asked everybody, who here likes broccoli? And then he says, you notice you get a lot of gas with broccoli? And everybody's saying, oh, yeah. And I'm saying, no, no. So he was also anti broccoli because it causes gas in some people, not
right,
all people. So that's the same
yeah.
thing here with dairy. It's like,
And the more we expose ourselves, generally, in many cases, the better we tolerate. Uh,
yes,
and and I agree 100%. Everyone can't be eating the same thing. We have different health goals, we have different preferences, different cultural foods that may be important to us.
yes, very right.
And
Yeah,
when it comes to something like, quote, a gassy food in the cabbage family or lactose, some people are lactose intolerant, like they really genetically just don't have enough of the enzyme in their gut to manage it. But there's also lactose sensitivity that can
yes,
happen to anyone when they have diarrhea.
right.
If they're on an antibiotic, it gives them diarrhea, or they have an illness and they have diarrhea. During periods of diarrhea, you're not that enzyme that helps you metabolize and break down the lactose is in your small intestine, and it's being wiped out when you're sick.
Right.
So
Yeah. So there's
you
reasons
have to
that,
kind of be in tune with your own body, and I'm all for avoiding things that don't agree with you or you
right.
don't like.
But not
But
not necessarily because it's happening to somebody else
right, not
or
because,
because some
yes, or it's
influencer,
generally
right?
toxic or something. I'm
Yeah.
so tired of
Oh,
that
that
word. I'm
word.
tired of these
I know.
people just branding about these words that
I know.
encompass,
It's
every
crazy.
possible thing that ails you.
It is
It
fear
doesn't work that
mongering,
way.
and it's fear mongering. And I think, going back to then, I mean, I feel like I've been talking about paleo for years, and we do know that things, diets, I should say, end up having a life of their own, where it starts out a certain thing. Like I always say with Atkins became a whole other thing
Mm-hmm.
than when Atkins originally started.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like 2010, maybe paleo, even though they probably had some weird stuff back then, it's gotten like almost super pumped almost. It's like, okay,
Yes.
another reason to avoid this and that. And we're going to say we're paleo because for some reason it just sounds great to
Yeah.
instead of just saying, yeah, I'm trying to eat healthy. Oh, how boring.
Yeah. It morphed into, yeah, I'm trying to eat, more vegetables and some lean protein. And now it's morphed into
Right.
all of these different things. And then like the carnivore side, the
Oh,
carnivore
right.
diet, I
That's,
think
oh,
stemmed from this in an even
yes.
more extreme
More
way.
extreme. More extreme.
And people who, weren't even born in 2010 are hearing things now,
What they're right,
misinformation that was
misinformation.
birthed from the paleo diet.
Yes, and they're going
Maybe
to
not by the founders,
right.
but by
But they're going to
other
grow and
people
they're going to grow up with this
and
now,
their
thinking
testimonies. Yeah.
maybe that they shouldn't be eating grains, they shouldn't be eating all these things they shouldn't be eating. And why are
Yeah.
people make it so difficult? I mean, do you know,
Hmm.
I mean, I
And
should
they're
know this,
scouring
right?
ingredient labels.
Ugh. But do you know, like, I mean, I know there has to have been research done on paleo. Has any research really supported following it as compared to, let's say, the Mediterranean diet? Like, has there been anything that's come out of it that has said, oh, this is a legitimate diet to follow for positive health outcomes?
I I am not aware of any research for the masses. Now,
Okay.
there's some research in terms of performance, but not widely adopted like public health
Okay, now,
research.
but I find that interesting. So for performance, it's been positive even without the grains.
I I think
I
one of
think it might
the
have been in some
yeah, one of
instances.
the master of science nutritionist, there's three guys that are sort of the head of the paleo diet. I
Okay,
can't remember his name right now, but he writes for the Lawn News, which is a cycling magazine. My husband's a cyclist, and he used to
cool.
be a triathlete,
Oh,
so I know that
in those
group of
circles.
that mentality of that kind of athlete, very driven. I often would tell my husband he used to, win his age group all of the time back in the day, and I would tell him, "You're one of the only normal eaters
Right. And
that
he,
I know."
Roseanne, he was
Not
winning.
because he was married to
No,
me exclusively, but also just because, he would pack a banana and a fig
I was
Newton,
just
and
going
he
to, was he,
wasn't buying bars, and he wasn't supplementing anything.
but wait
He
a second,
trained, did the
Roseanne.
physical stuff.
Roseanne, was he eating grains
He
and
was eating all the
and
grains
legumes? See
and
that?
all the
Oh
legumes.
my God. All
Yes.
right.
So, of course, and that's anecdotal. So I'm not going to publish that as, I'm
No.
not going to write a book because my husband was able to perform based on, I could write a book.
No.
Oh, this is what
But
he did, and
I
it worked for
think
him. So sometimes that's what it is. It's
right.
anecdotal. Just because it's a
Yes.
published study doesn't mean it's proof.
Right.
It's observational. It's anecdotal. And
100%.
when something works for an elite athlete, they are going to like be obsessed with it.
But
It's
I don't
almost
know,
like
Roseanne.
superstition.
Roseanne, I think you should be taking credit for it. Even though you're
For the
like, it
fig
had
Newtons
nothing
and
to
the
do with me, I would be like, you know what, I'm taking credit for it. My husband, if he was winning cycling races, I would be like, yeah, it's all me. It was
yeah,
because of what I fed him. Okay.
that's right.
Yep.
It
All
was,
right.
but I
So
rounded it all out.
there you go. If he wasn't married to you, he wouldn't have won. Now, when I introduced you, I had mentioned that you had written you had authored the second D.A.S.H diet for dummies, correct? Second,
Right.
okay. So the
Yes.
D.A.S.H diet is a diet that, it's like we talk about paleo and I question science. I like to use the D.A.S.H now as a comparison, and only because it has all the foods that paleo eliminates, and the
Hmm.
D.A.S.H diet has actual science to show that these foods that they omitted that are included in this diet have massive health benefits. right?
Right. Right. Right.
So explain briefly what the D.A.S.H diet is.
Right. So D.A.S.H stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. So it's an acronym. Hypertension is high blood pressure. And I wrote these consumer books for the For Dummies brand. I didn't invent the diet. It was a clinical trial out of the NIH, Heart and Blood Institute. Did the landmark trial was done in 1997.
Wow. Okay.
And multiple studies have been done
Since
over
then.
the years
Right.
since then. So the whole point of the study was to look at a dietary pattern, which actually is very similar to the dietary guidelines for Americans, which are published every 5 years and evolve a little bit, but it includes every food group. And the idea was to look at this particular dietary pattern and its parameters and look at the effect and the impact on blood pressure in people with high blood pressure.
Okay.
So not just anyone. These were people with high blood pressure. It was,
people with high blood
it
pressure.
included, yes. The study included Caucasians and African Americans. It was about 50-50 men and women.
Okay.
And it showed that those that followed this dietary pattern lowered their blood pressure significantly compared to the average diet. So the diet pattern itself, a lot of times, and I think anyone who, I grew up, I have a family history of heart disease, so that's why I was always interested in cardiovascular health and diet. And I remember, back in I'm dating myself, the 70s, when I was a kid, my dad had a cardiologist, and even today, many doctors will just say low salt diet, eliminate the salt. If you have high blood pressure, no salt. So sodium is a factor, and D.A.S.H diet plan is a lower sodium diet. But that's not the only important piece.
Well, see,
the other important piece is what you include in the
and
plan.
I think that's why I like to bring it up, because it's not, it was designed to stop hypertension, but to me, it's a diet for all healthy individuals or people with high blood pressure. Or it's just, to me, it's like the Mediterranean diet. It's really just another overall well-balanced, healthy eating plan is really what it is, even though I know it was designed specifically for those with hypertension. But
absolutely, it's a well-balanced diet. It can help people who are have a history of diabetes or any other kind of heart disease. There have been studies showing it can help with weight loss.
Doesn't it have a little bit more dairy than some other diets might? Is that part of it? It actually encourages a little bit more, higher dairy intake.
A little bit more. The recommendation for the average adult is 1 to 2 servings, and D.A.S.H is 2 to 3 servings of dairy. And again, the nutrients that support heart health, we want lower sodium, but we also need enough calcium and enough potassium in our diets. So dairy, fruits, and vegetables all are good sources of potassium. And of course, dairy is a good source of calcium. So 2 to 3 servings of low-fat dairy daily, which, would be milk, yogurt. However, they also did matching studies that for those who maybe can't tolerate dairy, can we still lower blood pressure on a D.A.S.H diet plan without the dairy? And the answer was yes.
And it also...
However...
Yes.
However, the dairy group lowered their blood pressure by more points than the one that didn't include the dairy.
But both groups...
there's something for everybody.
Right. Yeah. And both groups had whole grains. And both groups
whole grains were always there.
Had legumes.
Again, in balance. Not an unlimited amount of whole grains. Overall calories are still supposed to meet our energy needs.
It's just crazy, right? You're looking at this. It's showing that, and it's another thing that people hate to hear, that all foods can fit. And I know that. But going back to, if we look at, again, with the paleo, eating like our ancestors. Well, not everything when we go back is positive. You mentioned the cardiologist in the 70s. Cardiologists in the 70s smoked in their offices when
My
they were
dad's
seeing
cardiologist
yes, when they were
smoked.
seeing their
True.
patients. They had a cigarette in their hand.
Overweight, they smoked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, okay, so that was also a great way of
We
being.
learned things.
I mean, come on. We have to also go with current research and research that has been conclusive. That's not just one study that comes up in the year 2025 or 2024, but a body of evidence that
Exactly.
over the years that looks at it, a huge amount of participants, a long study. There's so much that goes into research, and the problem is with so many of these influencers and what they're promoting, they're not basing anything on research.
No,
They're
it's
doing
about
your
the body
example,
of evidence.
right? And your example of anecdotal. I mean, that's what they're doing. And
that's not, and as dietitians, we have a code of ethics. We aren't giving recommendations based on, oh, that worked for me,
right.
so you should do it too. And the nice thing about the D.A.S.H dietary pattern is it can be adapted to any culture. We can include the fruits and vegetables that you enjoy, the types of grains that your culture brings. And it just comes down to the portions and the balance.
Right.
We're using some oil. We're using 3 teaspoons, not a half a cup. We're not just drizzling with abandon.
Right. No, because
when the Food Network started, my mother, I'm of Italian heritage, so I'm not giving up pasta. And my mother watched the Food Network when it started, and she would she would gape, her mouth would gape open. How much olive oil are they using?
Oh my God, that's too funny. But
A, it's expensive, and B, there's calories in there. It's too much.
Rosanne,
too much of a good thing.
It's funny that you say though, not giving up the pasta. Last night I looked at my husband, and talk about also not going out there and saying that everyone should do what we do, because everybody. Their family history is different. Their activity level is different. So much is different. But last night I said to my husband, I was like, do you know any other woman that eats as much pasta as I eat? And I said, because we were ordering and I was like, oh, I'm going to have pasta again. And why I'm saying this is it's just interesting. I wouldn't, in counseling, I'm a huge fan of pasta, but I don't know if I would definitely encourage someone eating it as much as I do, because they might, for them, it might affect them differently in many different ways. For me, it is a staple. It's my favorite food, and I just love it. But we have to be careful what we recommend broadly. So do I recommend pasta as part of a healthy diet? 100%. Do I also recommend it with some vegetables, sometimes with beans as my protein, sometimes plant-based meat as my protein, sometimes regular, chopped sirloin. It varies. It's how you build the dish. And I think that goes back to full circle of this paleo diet, eliminating food groups as opposed to teaching an individual that they can still have the grain, have the vegetable, even the spinach, and
include adequate protein.
There you go. Put it all together, and also that not one size fits all.
Right. And that is the issue with, we are both online sharing information, but you can't counsel someone on Instagram. No. There's a difference between, a visit with a registered dietitian, because the way it works is I'm going to ask you, what are you doing?
Right.
What do you eat?
Yes.
What do you like?
Right.
Before I tell you, well, let's try this, or maybe you could less of this, more of that.
100%.
What we're doing, what social media and all of these influencers are doing, is just shoving their religion, their food religion, into people's face,
and their fear,
and then people are and they're receiving it, thinking, "Oh my gosh, I have to change everything."
Right, and Rosanne,
or
they're
I'm
tapping
be
into
not healthy.
Right, and Rosanne, they're tapping into fear. So that's why it's
Very
always,
emotional.
don't have this, don't have that. Will do this to you. That will do that. And maybe one person they knew had a negative reaction. Let's just suppose that even happened. Okay. That doesn't mean all other people are going to have that same reaction. I mean, when I think about the paleo, I mean, I guess there's some good if we're going to look at some good. For example, I mean, they do encourage, at least this gentleman, even though he said he wasn't encouraging paleo, fruit intake. We want that. Hey, in today's world, too many people are also saying eliminate fruit because of the sugar.
Right.
Even though
some vegetables, they're allowing some vegetables.
They're allowing some vegetables. And what else are they doing? I guess they do focus on lean protein, whatever that actually, I mean, I think that's confusing for the consumer, but they are encouraging, they're not like saying it's not like a keto diet where they're recommending high fat.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So like lean protein.
Yeah, we can build on that.
Yes.
But it's the elimination of entire food groups that I have an issue with any kind of diet philosophy. And that's, as I said, if we are, if you love pasta, but if you're talking to a client and they said, well, grains make my gut feel bad. You're not going to say, oh, well, you're lying. You should eat pasta.
Right.
No, you're going to listen.
Or if they told me, you know what, Keri, I don't want to add the shrimp or the veggies to it. I really love an Alfredo sauce. Okay. I mean, again, not the end of the world on occasion, but I wouldn't want them eating fettuccine, a huge bowl of fettuccine Alfredo every night.
Right.
I
comes down
don't
to
know
the portions.
Right, because it also then comes down to portions, and I think on the pasta front, we know it's because people just eat too much, and that's the problem there. So here we are. We're here with discussing a diet that just hasn't gone away. I thought it had until I listened to my person, and we have diets like the D.A.S.H that are built on science and others like the Mediterranean. So the consumer, like, I understand how they're so confused. And I felt bad when I left this lecture because I wanted to give my science, but I didn't want to be a pain in the ass and basically whatever. But how do people know? Like, who should they listen to? Like, what's the consumer to do?
Yeah. Well, I recommend they look for some credentials.
Okay.
And if they really have a medical issue, they really need to talk to someone in person.
Correct.
Not just try to self-diagnose and look for information on social media or the internet. We know that eating more fruits and vegetables full of antioxidants,
can't go wrong,
lots of vitamins that we need, that's an important part of your diet.
Yep.
So I think everyone can add more fruits and vegetables to their diet. And then often what that does is it displaces other things.
Yep.
And it helps satiate hunger and balance out meals so you're not always looking for another snack.
Yep.
I always want people to eat foods they enjoy. And it comes down to that balance and portion.
Right.
But you do need the fruits and vegetables, the whole grains for the fiber, and you need the protein for that full and satisfied feeling.
And I think that also, if you're a consumer and you feel like a diet needs a handbook with
rules.
instructions,
too many rules.
and it gets confusing, then run for the hills. I mean, it's not going to be the one for you. And I also feel like stop making it so complicated, everyone. All right? And we shouldn't be focused on eating like cavemen because this is the year 2025.
Right.
And lots has
today's vegetables
changed.
Are not the old mustard plants of,
and a lot has
10,000 years
changed.
ago.
And I always like to say my grandfather's lunch was a roll. He loved a roll with jam. And a bowl of cereal. Huge carbohydrate lunch with no fiber, and he lived well into his 80s, and that was a long time ago. All right, a very long time ago. So, come on,
right?
You know
and
what?
we have a lot of those anecdotal
Yes.
messages. I could say the same for my grandfather. And we can't rule out genetics
No, we
either.
can't either.
That plays a role.
Yeah.
Just because you're following a paleo diet, you're not going to look like that guy or that lady.
No, especially if they're doing that kind of exercise that a lot of them are doing. So,
Yeah,
and genetics. There's,
and that's a whole. I mean, exercise is
yeah,
huge too.
yeah.
I
There's
mean,
so much.
that's a
We're not even
really important
right.
part of health.
Yeah, we aren't even talking about sleep, exercise,
Right.
stress. So much more than just the
So
food
much more.
on our plates. We could go
Yep.
on, but I guess
And and where are you in your life? That's the other issue.
yeah.
There's nutrition across the lifespan. What
Yes.
you're eating when you're 50 is not what you should be eating when you're 25,
Okay.
or 10.
No,
And
exactly.
these messages tend to kind of just be these broad messages, whether you're 25 or 40 or 65. That's not how it works
No,
either. You
because
have to always adjust a little.
I love it. Yes, we
And
need to
yeah,
adjust. We need to come back to realizing one size does not fit all. And we have to just stop making it so damn complicated.
yeah.
All
Shed the
right.
guilt
Yes.
and
Oh,
the
no
shame.
guilt. No guilt, no shame. Doesn't belong with food. So, again, a
Mm-mm.
whole nother conversation. Uh, okay.
This was fun.
I'm
I
glad
don't know
you
that we
were my
solved
guest.
anything,
I
but
don't think,
hopefully
I don't know if we've solved anything.
good food for thought.
But it is food for thought. And hopefully, our message together will get into some people's brains and it will be positive because there's no fear mongering here. It has no place. All right,
Never.
Rosanne, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Keri.